Now.
Oops.
People, politics listeners and viewers. I am your political host, Will Wright. I'm joined by Josh, the ever faithful other host, Josh Bertram, Pastor Josh Bertram. And we're joined by
Hello.
Ethan Nicolle, pronounced like the girl's name. And Ethan is a comic book creator, artist, writer who's done a lot of really great work for VeggieTales and for Babylon Bee, as you can tell by the picture behind him. He's written a bunch of graphic novels and books, and one of his, or I should say probably one of my favorite books of his is Why Bears Want to Kill You, which we will be covering in moderate detail in our time together. So I just want to welcome you, Ethan. Thanks for joining us.
Hey, thanks for having me. I'm glad we finally got to work this out and have a chat, I guess.
Yeah. One thing that I've been wanting to ask you since we first booked this, like you've written a lot about bears, and clearly probably on the spectrum of bear expertise, you're probably up there. I mean, like you're like the Dr. You're the Dr. Fauci of bear lore.
Or is that a good or bad thing?
It all depends. I haven't read your emails yet.
Depends on if you're conservative or liberal.
Yes,
I've been very consistent on bears. I don't, there's no flip flopping here.
This is true. So
they will kill you.
Yeah. So I've read, and I mean, like all the work you do at Babylon Bee is all fine and dandy and whatnot, but really I want to kind of get at the heart of your critically acclaimed, soon to be New York Times bestseller. Assuming they're still in business. I heard they're failing. The book Bears Want to Kill You. And I'm curious on your thoughts on like the seemingly increased level of bear news making its rounds lately. For instance, in California, there's a gubernatorial candidate, I believe his name is John Cox, who campaigns like with the bear. And even most recently, there's like this viral video of this like girl that pushed this like bear off a wall to protect like her kindred.
Yes, I saw that.
Her dogs.
Yeah, and I'm like how serious is this bear problem?
It's complicated. I mean, there's definitely proof that they're involved in government, and they've got a lot of connections deep in, especially in California. I mean, the video going around right now, I would say, is probably a deep fake. So I think that there's probably like a giant Saint Bernard or something, and they just put a bear's face on top of it.
Exactly.
It's propaganda. It might have actually been put out by bears to make people feel like they can just run right up to a bear. Because bears love that. They just open their mouth and you just run right in their mouth.
Interesting. Yeah, because bears, I mean, nearest I could tell, bears basically run the media, right?
Yes.
Right. Well, yeah. I mean, you see everything from teddy bears and Teddy Ruxpin, just everything. There's this whole propaganda campaign of bears are cuddly and cute, and Coca-Cola does it. There's a lot of guilt to spread around. A lot of people have played a part, and so my goal is just to let people know, like, no, they just want to kill you.
Yeah, and I couldn't help. So here's your book for people that are watching us on YouTube, and you could see I've got it like tabbed and highlight. I mean, basically I'm gonna have to order another book because like my highlighters have started bleeding through some of the pages, and there's some really like interesting stuff on here. And what gets me is, so yesterday or last week we spoke with a cybersecurity expert, Paul Reisenzweig, and he was talking a lot about like these cyber attacks, these hacks, and meat processing plant and whatnot. And you actually have a section on cybersecurity in your book that pertains to bears. It's entitled Cyberbullying and Attacks on Social Media. So I was unaware that bears were so active on computers. And I'd love to get your take on that.
Well, a bear will go on attacking you. The face-to-face encounter is only the beginning. They will continue to attack you online, on social media, as long as possible. They'll make your life a living hell.
Wow. Yeah, that's
amazing.
That's great. Yeah, that is pretty amazing. So I guess, kind of transitioning from maybe a less important topic. I'm curious about, your faith. So, we can talk about Bear's faith later if you want, or, what a Bear's favorite book in the Bible is, but you work for a a predominantly Christian conservative organization, the Babylon Bee. And I love to just hear a little bit about sort of like what your faith upbringing was, and kind of, how did that roll into sort of like the work that you do today?
Well, my faith upbringing, that's complicated. So my parents, when I was a kid, they went to kind of a somewhat normal church, just kind of like a Sunday family get together church. And then they divorced when I was 8. My mom went to Roman Catholic and my dad went Pentecostal. And my dad was a homeless opera singer who was Pentecostal.
Wow.
And so I would go with him on some Sundays and to this church where he's singing so loud and singing in tongues with a voice that could like sing to an auditorium of people without mics. And then my mom's, she'd sing in the choir. They were both artsy people. That's how they met. But at the Roman Catholic Church, just like a totally different environment. So I started off very confused by exactly what Christianity was. Felt like very bipolar. And so I kind of denied it all for a while. And then I kind of found my faith for myself in high school through Young Life. And as far as, I mean, I don't know. I feel like that's been the question of my life. Like, how does my faith fit into what I do? Like straight out of high school, I went through this phase where I thought, I'm just going to be a pastor. I don't want to just, comics are of the world, so I didn't draw for like 2 years. But it was later, it was actually an atheist that like I met who was this hardworking, wanted to draw. He looked at the way that I could draw and the way that I could create. And he was like, I don't know how you do that. And he was so shocked that like I kind of devalued my abilities. And he was shocked that I would think that it wouldn't glorify God if I was using that stuff, because it was like, what was so unique about me, and it's me, So that was kind of that's been the question of my life. Like, how do I do it properly? Like, there's kind of the generic answers that you have to make your way through. Like, do I just make Noah's Ark comics for the rest of my life? And how do you find your unique voice? And so I've kind of just been kind of going for it. I just kind of went, what, I'm just gonna make. I'm not going to cross any moral boundaries that I feel bad about, but I'm just going to make stuff. And it's led interesting places, like here I am in Babylon Bee. It just kind of happened because, I was kind of like secretly a fan of the Babylon Bee. They were like posting jokes and stories that like, as I was working in Hollywood at the time, it was a relief for me to see somebody say that and like to see all the likes on it and go, oh, okay, I'm not alone thinking like this is kind of crazy. So I'd send him messages now and then. I finally found Kyle Mann, the head writer at the time, and sent him a message. Oh, and he had followed me on Twitter. Turns out he was a fan of Axe Cop, which is a comic that I'd made. And so it also turned out completely coincidentally that he lived out here where I live in like the Inland Empire, which is like 50 miles east of Los Angeles. So most people that move down to Southern California don't move out here. Most people out here have lived here for a while. And he's one of those people. He's like from out this way. I moved out here for love because I found my wife on eHarmony. So, because I originally moved down here for the animation industry, and I actually didn't start working in Hollywood until I moved out 50 miles from Hollywood and started having to commute. So, but it's just funny because I'm like, I happen to be 5 miles from Kyle from the Babylon Bee. And
wow.
So when the site got bought, Kyle became editor-in-chief, and I became the second employee. Once they could afford to hire a second employee, they brought me on, and I've just kind of been here all along the way. And it's been really fun because I do a lot more than, for the Bee, I was just doing Photoshops mostly and writing. I do a lot of stuff. I do animation. I can draw. I can write. I can sing. I love doing all sorts of stuff. And I always thought I'd have to pick one thing, but at the Babylon Bee, I get to do everything I can do. It's a blast. It's working here.
Dancing? You get to dance?
I could. I
Interpretive
don't count
dance?
that as one of my talents, but maybe I I haven't explored it.
That's awesome. So you, when you're writing these articles, one of the questions we have is how much research goes into the articles that are being produced and that you're taking part of. Like what does that process look like?
Well, I admittedly am not hugely involved in the article writing process these days. Excuse me, I think I'm getting a little bit sick. Some kind of cold my kids got. If you know me, my voice cracks sometimes, and it cracks a lot when I get sick. So, sorry, what was the question again?
Oh, just like the research process that goes into writing these Babylon Bee articles in general.
I mean, I think Kyle is more of a stickler for like getting certain details right, even though it's usually an absurd joke. I'm not so, I mean, I'll try to get some things right, but we're trying to make it really absurd. Like we want to make it, we're not trying to make it just that close to reality, So I like pushing it, like I think the last article I wrote was, who's the mayor in Chicago? Lightfoot. She said she would only interview one-on-one with a person of color, no white people. And so we did the article where I didn't write the headline, but I wrote the copy and did the Photoshop. That Thomas Sowell accepted the offer, who, he would probably be like a smoldering pile of ashes if she tried to interview Thomas Sowell. So in the article, he jumps through the wall like the Kool-Aid man, like just things that couldn't happen. So, it's just stupid stuff like that. I like coming, generally when I try to do jokes for the Babylon Bee, it's less about trying to make, like we're making a political point, but like there's like the left word, firing at the right word firing at the left. I really like try to find that absurd third way where you're kind of like you're almost mocking both sides. Like
that's great.
I think that's something people don't understand about the Babylon Bee is we are very self-deprecating. So a lot of the time, like a lot of the jokes that people think, like this identifies as that jokes. There's an element of like we're making fun of our own side on some of that stuff, like because it's so dumb. Like
totally.
Yeah, we're not sitting there like with our glasses pushing. We're like, no, that is brilliant comedy, But we're just having fun. The thing I've had to learn about the Babylon Bee coming out of Hollywood is like this is like the guys here most of the guys that work at the Babylon Bee and write, they work regular jobs. Like there's only like a tiny handful of us that do this full time, and it's the type of jokes you would tell like on the line at work, whatever you're doing, just kind of like making comments about what's going on in the news. And so it has that element to it where it's a little more kind of just I don't know if like avuncular or dad humor sometimes. I don't know. We're not ashamed to be like, we'll get called boomer humor. And at first you get like, how is that? Why is that offensive? I don't know. For one thing, there's some of the greatest comedians are boomers and deserve to laugh. I don't know. Anyway.
Exactly. I got to ask this question. How many times rather, maybe it's per day, have people come to you and they actually thought you got something where they thought this was real? Like what you're writing was actually true and someone believed it. Like, have you ever had a story in the paper where someone like, I don't know, went into a bunker and took their whole family because they were afraid of what you said or something like that? And they tried to blame you or sue the Babylon Bee or something because of false advertising or fake news or something.
I can't think of any time they've tried to come after us for it. There have been some pretty upset. I mean, there's two of my favorite ones that people have thought a lot of people have thought were real. The most common accusation we get from the left, we've seen this in like the New York Times and things, where they'll call us humor disguised as satire, I think, or something like that. Like they act like we're nefariously trying to trick conservatives, and they even like put out these surveys showing that conservatives are very gullible and they can't tell the difference between satire and reality, and they're kind of really skewed surveys. But two of my favorites were ones that tricked the left. There was one where I think it was at Liberty University. What's the name of that university?
Mm-hmm. Liberty, yep.
Falwell, yeah. And so we put one that they put a giant stained glass window of Trump up, and I did the Photoshop of the giant stained glass window, and it was really flattering because like I get so many liberals thought that was real.
That's amazing.
They're posting, "This is disgusting." And then my other favorite one was really funny. We did this one where after RBG, Ruth Bader Ginsburg, passed, the NBA, in honor of her, all wore these little lace doily collars. And so you see LeBron James wearing this like doily lace collar, like, and there was so many inspired people on the left that were sharing it with like a little happy face with tears, like, this is beautiful. Like,
that's amazing.
They thought it was real.
That's
and
amazing.
Oh my.
A lot of them were very convinced. Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
But
so
in both those instances, obviously, they're so absurd. So it's, we weren't trying to trick people into thinking that's true, but it kind of like reflects how ridiculous society has gotten, that enough people would think both those things were true.
Yeah, that's so what's going on, I guess, between the Babylon Bee and Snopes. It seems like Snopes is out to satire the world, but specifically with a focus on you guys.
Right.
Like
they've calmed down a bit. It seems like I haven't kept up, but I mean, there's also a lot of other fact checkers now. Like we just had one. We did the Lego put out non-gendered Legos. It's just a smooth brick that no holes or bumps or whatever. and it went like, if you search that right now, you search Babylon Bee Legos fact check, it comes up on like Reuters and USA Today, and like they tried to contact Lego and like,
oh my gosh.
Anyway, yeah. But I forgot what the question was again.
Oh, about Snopes. Yeah, it seems like
they're
Snopes. Out. Mm-hmm.
Our spat with Snopes, was that like a year ago maybe? It got the most heated when we had this one story up about Chick-fil-A. I can't remember the exact story, but they accused, there was really a real accusatory language in what they posted. I cannot remember the exact quote from that, but they basically said that we were, that we weren't really trying to be funny. We were trying to trick everybody and make them mad. Was the gist of it. So I think our CEO did threaten legal action. Snopes changed their article, but it was a big dust up. And they have, if you go to their website, I mean, they've got pages and pages of our stuff. I assume when you're a fact checker, I mean, if you need the hours, you're just going to go and find it. It's probably got to be a treasure trove once you find like a comedy website. And if you can like cross, go, oh, it's just, well, yeah, obviously nothing here is true, but yeah, let's fact check all this. That'll give me some work. That's the sense I get, because they go into detail. I mean, these guys act like
it's like fact checking a novel or something.
Yeah,
like that.
Yeah,
like MacGyver or something.
It's like, how come you're not like fact checking the Marvel Cinematic Universe? I mean, like all the laws that they espouse. I mean, superheroes aren't real.
That is what I love. Speaking of the universe, I really love thinking of them as Drax from
Drax
from a Guardians of the Galaxy. The guy, he just cannot understand sarcasm or irony.
That's amazing.
Everything's literal.
No kidding. So your primary audience, or the advertised audience, is primarily Christian conservatives. Is that accurate?
It's probably primary. Yeah, that's primary. But it's been interesting because, I mean, the Babylon Bee started off. I think one thing a lot of people don't really get is when we first started, the thing that really made the Babylon Bee go viral was the church jokes, and that. So a lot of people's perception is that we weren't political, and then we got political. Fact is, we were always political from day one. There was some Obama jokes and things on the Babylon Bee. We've always had that stuff where we take on those issues, abortion and stuff. But the audience shifted. I mean, from the beginning, it launched, and the audience was primarily sharing the church articles, and then the church articles kind of got played out. I mean, there's only so many skinny jeans worship leader headlines you can write. So we still try to keep doing the church humor, even because that's part of who we are. But those do not get the shares these days. I mean, every once in a while. We love, our favorite sweet spot though is to find that link between faith and what's going on in the news. So kind of our take on it. Like one of my favorite ones a while back when there's a lot of cancel culture stuff happening. I can't remember exactly who had just recently gotten canceled. Somebody had all their tweets dug up, and we did one about the prodigal son and how his father had once again rejected him because of his horrible tweets. So he had been brought back home, and then his Twitter history had been checked. I wish I had the actual headline memorized, but it's one of those ones that just, it's perfect, and you read through it, and it did really well, but it reminded people of a Bible story. Those are my favorite ones where we kind of hit that sweet spot. But yeah, so things have shifted where our audience, I'll see atheists that are fans. I'll see liberals that are fans. I'll even see, we just got a message from someone who's trans the other day. So, I mean, our audience is like, definitely like the bulk of our audience is Christian conservative. But it has been interesting since it seemed to happen under Trump that the conservative side became much more, the umbrella got much bigger. There's a lot more. I think it became people who kind of hold free speech and those kind of values as important started to ally a lot more, have started to over the last 4 or 5 years, it seems like. So it's been interesting. It's really like woke versus unwoke. It feels like is like where we're headed with, it's not Christian versus atheist or even left versus right. It's like, because there's a people on the left, but they're not playing in, if they're not on board with all the woke stuff, then they're not considered really truly on the left, right? That's how it seems. So that suddenly we're like palling up with people that, we disagree on a lot of things, but we at least agree on like things are getting a little crazy and people are getting,
it's almost like if
a weird religion taking over.
Yeah, it's almost like if you believe that Biden's a legitimate president, you're not really on the right, kind of the same.
Yeah, I could say that.
Yeah, definitely. In light of that idea of free speech, is there anything that you guys think is off limits in terms of bringing satire to or joking about or something along those lines?
Yeah, I mean, I think anything, like we're careful around, we don't touch a lot of sexual stuff, it's just not an area. Anything that we hold sacred, I mean, yeah, that's one thing I think is kind of I don't buy it when comedians say that nothing is sacred. I've never met a comedian who actually believes that, because you could find something they won't joke about, especially in our culture. There's a ton of things people won't joke about now. There are people don't even say that anymore. They used to say that, oh, nothing's sacred. Now they say like, here's the tiny amount of things you're allowed to joke about. The rest is off limits.
Right.
And, so I think that's one thing I appreciate is just being honest and being like, yeah, there's just certain things we're not going to go there. We're not going to blaspheme God for a good joke, though some people have accused us of it.
Yeah. Now I've got a question. So some of our listeners, knowing that we were going to have a chat with you, wanted to ask some questions. So I was going to ask a question from Sarah, who asked, who wants to know if there's a story that you've always wanted to write, but knew that you couldn't because of legal issues or maybe like it went a little too far or something like that.
I can't think of a story I'd want to write and why those reasons would stop me. It's mainly that it's time. And does she mean a Babylon Bee story or just like a story?
Yeah.
Okay. Babylon Bee story.
Mm-hmm.
I would say, okay. Yes, there was one that we wrote and it wasn't super original, but it felt like Netflix had put out a gay Jesus film, acting like they were super edgy and hard. Oh man, we're so edgy. We're putting out a gay Jesus movie. It was like some comedy from whatever. And so we had one all geared up to go, and it wasn't super original, but it was like we wanted to hit Netflix back. And they, it was Muhammad and drag movie. Let's see, if you're really brave, do a Muhammad and drag movie. And so we worked up the whole I photoshopped up like the image of what the page on Netflix would look like. But then we just at the end of the day, I just looked at it and went, if terrorists saw this and thought that was real and they bombed Netflix, I'd feel pretty bad. So we ended up.
Wow.
But we struggled with it because like we really wanted to shine a light on that stupidity there, you know. So.
Mhm.
Yes,
Wow.
no, that totally makes sense. I feel like that would yeah, I would feel the same way. You know, when you're poking fun at both sides, did you find yourself getting like hate mail or people really angry and talking about like uproar, like from like Trump or Pence
Oh, yeah.
fans when you like poke fun at them?
Yeah, I would say equal or more emails we were getting, especially while Trump was in office, were from angry Trump fans. They're very precious about Trump. Yeah. Yeah. In fact, I think our more impassioned, angry emails tend to come from our side.
Hmm.
Really?
I
Wow.
think the most hate we get is probably from our side, because the most hate we get is it has either been Trump supporters or liberal Christians or progressive Christians. Progressive Christians, like, that are kind of really publicly progressive blue check types that have like 6,000 followers and they're trying to be like influencers, you know, and that's like their thing. Like they got like little glasses and the gelled up hair, and they're like, I'm a trans Christian pastor or whatever. Like, they hate us, those guys. Just hate us.
That's so funny. I'd
Oh my
imagine
gosh.
being in the industry that you are, you probably get, I don't know, like you probably get pitched a lot of different ideas and stories, and what have you. So, have like what's the craziest idea you've ever been pitched, and why is the idea I'm about to pitch to you right now the coolest? So here's my idea. The
Oh, dear.
9161 project. It's a backwards chronology of how much worse things have gotten for blacks, and it stops at 1619. There it is. There's my pitch.
Well, you're making me think.
So 9161 is just 1619
1619 backwards.
Yeah. Yeah. So it's just a backwards chronology of how things have gotten worse for black people. That's it. Since today. You could start at Obama, probably, you know, like since Obama was sort of
Started
the
at
crown
Obama
jewel.
and then go to the year 9161.
No, go to the year 1619.
Oh.
So
it goes backwards?
Yeah.
Oh, like
anyways.
nine.
That's a stupid idea.
I actually do get a lot of those ones where the person's like really thought about it a whole bunch, and like, you know, the little math symbols flying by their head.
Yeah.
And they like share it and they think that, yeah, it's like, but
And you're
that's
like,
also,
wait.
we all have those headlines where it's all worked out in our head. And then that is the big challenge, getting like the clear joke to just like, because the best way, like the best headline hides the punchline until like the last word. Like the very last word changes it to where you think you're reading a real headline, and then that last word or two just goes, it flips it, and suddenly you realize there's a joke there. And that's the biggest challenge, is keeping it concise.
Because I'm curious. I mean, like, even though that was sort of a stupid pitch, but like, I am kind of curious on like how does the creative process actually even work? Like, do you guys all sit in a room, you turn on Fox, CNN, MSNBC, look how dumb the world is, and you're like, okay, I can make a joke out of that, you know?
I think most of because pretty much since I came on as they basically, I was the second employee ever, and they're like, I guess just pick a title, because Kyle's editor-in-chief. We were working in his garage. I'm like, all right, creative. I looked up the Onion, and I was like, okay, there's editor-in-chief, and the next guy is creative director, so I'll be that. And but I kind of, you know, Kyle is so closely married to the articles. It's a very personal process for him. It's very hard for him to like. It's even really hard for him to share it. And even Photoshops, like I was finding him just doing most of the Photoshop stuff. I was like, what is my job here? But I always had vision for the Babylon Bee that it would grow way beyond just the articles. So that's been my thing. Like I created the podcast. I just built out. We got animation, video sketches, the new giant golden book that we have. That was all my stuff. So like I'm very extracurricular when it comes to Babylon Bee. For the writers, so Kyle is very much like the godfather when it comes to the writing on the Babylon Bee. Very like, you know, he's full time. He's very much connected to those stories getting out every day. We have one other guy who's not quite full time, Joel Berry, who works very closely with Kyle, but he lives on the other side of the country. A few days a week, making sure things get up. And the rest of our writers, they're all online. And they're paid like a kind of a part-time fee, and they all have real jobs, and most of them have like jobs we couldn't compete with, like some like high level computer programmers and microbiologists, or like doctor. One's a doctor. Like these guys are like real people with real jobs that we could never pay enough to work just for us, but they're just doing their jobs. And then every once in a while they'll just get on the Slack channel or whatever and just like throw in some ideas. So really it's something they do on their coffee breaks, and it's part of kind of their side hustle, I guess, whatever you want to call it. It's just a way to blow off steam, really, because that was like me. I mean, I was like working in Hollywood at a TV show, but when I finally got to start pitching headlines to the Babylon Bee, like it was just like a release. It was just fun to like sit there and blow off that steam.
That sounds amazing, man. So, I know we want to be cognizant of time. So I have one kind of last question here. And then for me and Will, if he has any follow-ups, he might ask those too. But if you wanted to say something too, like what's something you want to say to listeners of our podcast that span the spectrum politically and religious? We have atheists, Muslims, a lot of Christians, but a lot of people who aren't, a lot of people on the left, people on the right. What's something a message you would want them to hear from you or the Babylon Bee that you feel like is important for them? And you can make it half satire, half serious, however you want to do that.
I just want people to be able to appreciate disagreeing and understanding that almost all the things that we disagree on or that we fight the worst about are things like we can't actually prove. Our deepest held beliefs, and it might even be why we get so passionate about them, is because we can't actually physically prove them. So all the things that people get really up in arms about, and just to sit there and admit that, like, that's the thing we have in common. There's a huge portion of our lives that we can't actually prove, and we're doing our best. And like,
that's brilliant
to be able to talk about that and just admit that. And I think that, it's a miracle when you stand back and look at America and the fact that we have so many varied beliefs and we haven't all killed each other yet. It really is a miracle. I mean, just looking through other countries, right? I mean, so treasure that. And I hate the polarization. I think we need to be able to joke. We need to allow each other to joke and to laugh at each other's jokes and to just lighten up. Holy cow.
No kidding.
I got less deep towards the end, but
that's brilliant.
It's true. I mean, like, so kind of ending us where we started, what effect do polar bears have on the polarization in this country? I don't think that you covered that in your book.
Polar bears, I mean, I remember I wrote something about polar bears in that book. Basically all bears are the same. They're shapeshifters. They can kind of change color. So it's all, polar bears are just bears that just chose to be white. They are more white supremacists than other bears, but I remember I had something about polar bears like shooting giant like bear poop into space or something, but I can't remember that part. I think they're like blasting the ozone layer, maybe.
Yeah, because I do recall in your book you said that bears don't actually need to poop. They generally just poop out of spite.
Right. Yeah, they don't actually have to because they're so efficient. They digest everything they eat, but they can conjure it up if they want to just do something really mean, like drop one on someone's glass coffee table and just watch the look on their face.
That's good.
No. Well, thank you, Ethan, for being so generous with your time. We really appreciate having you on. And how can people, I guess, learn more about just sort of like your work, your career, your creative, professional CV, if you will?
Well, I guess the best place to find out stuff I've done is ethannicolle.com. That's Nicolle with 2 L's, Nicolle. The two things I would promote the most is Bears Want to Kill You is a great Father's Day gift. And I don't know if that's the paperback that you have there, but I do still have just under 200 copies of the hardcover with a slipcase Fancy Pants edition. That's very nice. If you buy it from my store, which is axebearstore.com, AXE bearstore.com, you can get it. I'll draw in it, sign it. You can put stickers with it and make you a whole fancy package. And then I also have my children's book that I wrote about a year ago called Brave Valley Possum. I'm very proud of this book. It's kind of like what I wanted for to read to my kids as the guy who reads bedtime stories. I wanted like an epic, dark, but very comedic, sometimes very gross story with fun voices. It's very Roald Dahl, but it's got like over 200 illustrations in it. So it's also very illustrated. So it looks thick. And it is, it's pretty epic long, but there's a ton of illustrations. So it's an illustrated novel. You can get both of those on Amazon or from my store. And I also did the audiobook on this one, on both of them, actually.
Awesome.
Which you can get on Audible.
But preferably from your store, because we don't want to keep encouraging the left in their cancel culture.
That's right. And if you buy, if you buy Bears Want to Kill You on Amazon, I still get the order and mail it to you from my garage. So
really?
Yeah.
And for our conservative listeners, correct me if I'm wrong, every book that you order from you, a small piece of a liberal gets fed to a bear. Is that correct?
Right. Sure.
Okay. All right. Well, great. Well, thanks again. Thanks again, Ethan. We really appreciate having you on. And to our listeners and viewers, we'll see you next week.
All right. Thanks, guys.
All right. You can hit, I guess.